Hi, I'm John,
Hi, I'm Evan.
and this is on today's episode of Finding the Unfound. We're going to be covering SCP 6305 and 6310. Um, so, SCP 6305 is a safe anomaly, right? And its special containment uh, procedure is basically a 16-meter exclusion zone around Washington Middle School. Okay, so this SCP takes place. This SCP um, is described as the events surrounding the summer of Washington Middle School in 2012 related to the death of the former student Aaron Fisher. Okay. Um, and so this is a really good article, right? But most of the article is in the exploration, and like most of the plot is, right? So SCP the SCP exploration log of the ICT, right? The initial containment team, right? Starts off with three individuals from this containment team entering the middle school. These three individuals, Freeman, Hedge, and Brown, enter the middle school, right? And it's pretty picturesque horror movie in this. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, they go through it, right? And they are finding dead bodies. They find the dead body of the principal, two decomposed already corpses, um, in the principal's office, right? And they keep going through, and they start seeing like bodies mangled and spiders coming out of these bodies, like tons of spiders. Um, and you can hear the team reacting to it in the audio log, or as I guess it's described here. And within the walls of the middle school are the faces of the students and some of the teachers. And
Yeah,
the
dude, that was the
yeah,
creepiest part.
yeah, right. And they're in there, and there are spiders coming out, and that's essentially the first like contact, right? And so that's the first contact, and Brown and Freeman die. The two of the guys. And unbeknownst to the researchers, because like recordings cut off, Hedge gets out of the researcher Hedge gets out of the um, he gets out of the facility, right? He gets out of the middle school, and then they began to interview Hedge, right? And because of
Yeah.
the anomalous nature of this SCP, they have facial recognition scanning Hedge the entire time. And the person interviewing Hedge is senior researcher Amir Nasser. Now, he's the central character in this plot. And he was
Yeah.
actually a teacher at the middle school before he became a senior researcher at the foundation.
Yeah, which
And
is wild. It shows you like how
yeah,
much
well,
Nasser got involved.
it's kind of weird because there's like time that passes in the middle school, but like they never really like kind of talk about it. You know what I mean? Because like the first report is in 2022, but it's after the death of the student in 2012, right?
Yeah.
And so Nasser during this interview is interviewing Hedge, right? And it already kind of seemed weird for Hedge after a couple of lines, right? The facial recognition scanner is scanning positive, like it does it about twice, where it scans positive, and after the second time, Hedge says the kids deserved it, right? The dead kids on the walls deserved it. They hurt me, I mean
Yeah.
him. So Hedge specifically says they hurt me, I mean him. And that's where Nasser starts to realize something's up. And the facial
Yeah.
recognition does undetectable, right? And that's when you know
Mhm.
something's up, okay? And Hedge, right, reveals himself to be kind of attached to this anomaly, right?
Yeah.
And
Aaron Fisher, right? I mean, that's
it
what it seemed
relates
like.
to Aaron Fisher,
Immediately.
right? The
Yeah.
SCP 6305.
Yeah.
And so Nasser starts freaking out, right? He calls for security, and the security personnel in the SCP Foundation can't get the door open.
Yeah.
And they eventually have to cut the door open, and they find poor Nasser, like, in the corner, and, like, had urinated himself. He'd peed his pants. Um, and so, after that, Nasser requests the transfer, right? So it ends, right? They contain the anomaly, and
Oh well, don't forget, Hedge snapped his neck.
yeah, Hegg snapped his own neck, right? As a part of the he's kind of contorts himself and snaps his own neck. Hedge
Yeah.
does, and that's what really freaks Nasser out, right? And then, um, it goes to the second, kind of anomaly, and it does state, right, that Nasser requests a transfer. Now, because of his close contact with the middle school, the SCP-05 Council rejects that request, and Nasser is to finish this out, right?
Yeah.
And that's the end of the second kind of log here, right? The third log is the poor D class that they send into this middle school, and it specifically says they send this D class into the middle school with a 9mm pistol with rubber bullets. I don't know what that's going to do.
Yeah, I know. I remember reading that and going like, "Wow, that's something." He's not going to come out alive.
It was a choice. I mean, D clans are always they have a pretty low fatality rate. You know what I mean? They have a pretty high fatality rate. Like they're not usually making it through.
Sure,
But
yeah, it's definitely the bullet monkeys they put in some of
yeah,
those
yeah.
situations
Um,
amongst all the SCPs.
yeah, it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
So they send D class, right, 1632. I mean 1623 into the school, and they have Nassers talking to him the whole time, and they go through a lot of the buildings, and it's a pretty typical horror movie kind of thing. They go through the library, the science room, which is Nasser's old classroom,
Oh,
the gymnasium, and yeah. And so as he's going through it, right, he's a pretty cooperative D class, right? Nasser's talking him through it. He has to hide, right? You're seeing these elements of like Aaron Fisher throughout the school,
yep.
and it ends like this D class is kind of meeting Nasser, right? And in a way, right, is kind of entity that looks like it has multiple faces all over its body.
Hmm.
And the D class dies, right?
Yeah.
But the D class was able to retrieve Aaron Fisher's journal, right?
Yeah, which they cracked open and read.
They cracked open and read, and that's the next thing. And the most important thing is, right, um, is Nasser was not, I'm not Nasser, Aaron Fisher, the entity, was not treated well by his classmates. He was treated very poorly.
Oh yeah, he was quite bullied.
Yeah, he was really bullied, right? And so he tried out for the play, and he got a part in the play. And these kids hid spiders in his costume, right? Hence the spiders coming out of the kids. Like, they were bullying him in that way. And, he even mentions Naxxus in one of his journals. He said he's a pretty weird guy, pretty funny, though, but he didn't appreciate it when Nasser made him stand up in front of the class. And so they're mentioned right in that journal. And then the journal kind of ends with, like, one of the instances of him being bullied. And then the O5 Command, O5 Council, orders scientist Nasser to investigate it himself. They order him to investigate the gymnasium himself. And Nasser does. And Nasser, essentially, he runs into Aaron, and you really see Aaron in his full form. The people that have died, their faces are on his body, and they are at rest. Right? The faces are all over, I guess, this entity. And
Yeah.
it's weird how they symbolize at rest. Nasser feels no regret for what he did as an entity. Getting rid of these kids and the containment, right? The initial containment team. And Nasser has a pretty good conversation with him. And Nasser apologizes. He said, "I wish I could have helped you." And it keeps going, right? And Nasser says, "I can help you, Fisher, right? Let me help you." And Fisher asks, "Are you mad at me? Do you blame me?" And Nasser says, "No, I don't. Um, you know, I promise I can help you."
Yeah.
And then, right, it's not exactly clear, but they kind of move Aaron Fisher, right, in his body, and they cremate him. It's kind of the ending of it, right? The
Yeah.
entity, they cremate him, and they they spread his ashes, is what they saw. And
Hmm.
so
No,
they,
it was a beautiful ending.
yeah, yeah, and then they essentially um, all anomalous uh, entities kind of well, it was kind of beautiful, but like the anomalous parts of the school cease, and they focus on rebuilding the middle school. So that's kind of where it ends. And so that's 6305. Evan, what are
Yeah,
your
and
thoughts?
it didn't become an SCP by the end of it, right? Because they
It's
started rebuilding it.
neutralized, so that's why
It's
it's weird. Is that
neutralized.
it's safe? Is right? It kind of seems like it's neutralized to me, right? What does it seem
Yeah.
like to you?
No, it definitely seems neutralized to me as well. They didn't say that in the top of the SCP wiki document. But at the same time, they might also not have said it's neutralized because if you just look at like how kids would be if they got back in that school, like the bullying could, resume to some other kid and whatnot, which is why
Yeah.
they're like, well, it's not really neutralized
Well,
because
I don't know.
bullying's gonna happen.
Well, I don't know if they didn't neutralize it for the reader, or if that's why they consider it safe. Because I just it's weird how they, but that doesn't matter. I mean, they'd never actually tell you how Aaron Fisher died. So part of you like,
No, they don't.
so part of it you thinks that it was suicide, right? Um,
Yes, I thought it was suicide.
it could have been like a
Because the
poisonous
bullying
spider
got
for all
so
I know,
extreme.
right?
Yeah. I think the big question I had with this one was like, why did Nasir get so like it's okay, it's going to be okay when like Aaron is saying all these terrible things. Like I couldn't tell if Aaron was still in like the kid form, which is why Aaron was like,
Yeah,
those kids deserved it, and like I don't feel bad for a single thing that I did. Like, I guess it might be an extreme. It shows Nasar's extreme character when it comes to realizing, like, you know what, I know he doesn't mean it.
uh,
And the only thing I can do here is, is to be comforting, is to be for this kid.
yeah. I think that part of it was that, but I think Nasser kind of knew what he had to do, right? I think Nasser is a foundation research, like a senior researcher in the foundation. At the end of the day, he really is, right?
Yeah.
And
His
he
goal is to contain.
he knows he's gonna contain it, like at least put the kid at peace, right? And
Right.
so like that's how I kind of think about it, right? Is that like um Nasser knows what he's gonna do, right? I mean, like the foundation is secure, contain, protect. It's going to contain at all costs. The ends always justify the means with the foundation, and I think Nasser kind of thinks about that in a way. But maybe Nasser, when he says he's going to help him, and they kind of neutralize him, right? Maybe that's his way of feeling like he helped him. He put him at peace, right? And so
Yeah. I
maybe
think that is
Nasser's
a good way of looking at it.
I think maybe Nasser's viewing it that way, or Nasser's just like, I need to move on to another project, right? like there might be, so like I don't know what there is in saying, right? But like, yeah, like that's kind of the gist of it, right? Is like I think
Hmm.
that I don't know, yeah, I think that Nasser kind of represents the foundation and the end of it, right? And then like his anxiety, right, in the school, it doesn't change what happens to the entity,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah, I think the other question I had, or at least the cool thing with this, was the entity that was Aaron Fisher. Even though they talked about within the containment part of the SCP, like, you're not allowed within 16 meters of the school.
And they like have it patrolled at all times
Yeah,
or
they
something
have
like
it
that. Yeah.
patrolled. But when you see how Hedge got in there, along with the other two, and he was able to make it out, the embodiment of Aaron Fisher and the hallucinations and schizophrenia that ensues upon the person, it's still carried within Hedge
Well,
as he leaves, which that to me was like, whoa.
Well, I think it's like I don't know if it's that. I think it's like a spectral thing. I don't know if it's like a mental illness thing, right? It's like so it's a spectral anomaly is what they call in it, which is just SCP logos
Oh,
with
okay.
ghosts and stuff. So like I think that like there is probably some kind of possession piece to it when it came to Hedge.
I see. I think they used in the story they used the term schizophrenia.
Oh, did they?
Um,
Yeah.
um, which might be the effect, right? But I
Oh
still
yeah,
think
that might
you're
be one of the effects of the anomaly, right? Like that it
right.
has that on the people that
That
enter
might
it.
be when you're actually in there. Like the spiders, for example, are they
Yeah.
actually real, or is it the spiders that you see because the anomaly is taking effect on you, which is providing the schizophrenia of seeing all of the arachnids?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I mean, it could be
but
that too.
yeah, still though, like to see Hedge come out and then snap his neck because Aaron Fisher was
His
like,
own
essentially
neck.
the same. Yeah, essentially Aaron Fisher was like, you deserve this too. Like you came in and for some reason, to Aaron probably the anomaly in the school during the time of the first log thought you're coming in here to make fun of me, therefore you deserve it, and I hate you. And so that's when he's still with Hedge during the facial detection and in the first log, right? Like that's probably why he snapped his neck. He said, "You deserve this. Hate you."
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like I mean, the O5 Council clearly made the right choice in sending Nasser in because he was the one that could make this entity safe. And the Foundation,
Yeah.
like, it doesn't actually believe in neutralizing SCPs unless like they have to, right? They would much prefer to contain them and study them. And so, but in the end, right,
Hmm.
they um they ended it, right? They put him at peace. They put Aaron Fisher at peace. And it's it's like a really it's a really messed up story. Like they're middle schoolers dying. Like I
Yeah.
mean, but it's also kind of about Fisher kind of having peace in a way too, and Nasser moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, far as that though, still still crazy that a middle school was able to cause so much damage to people. Um,
Yeah, that's like well, it's middle school, man. Like like
yeah.
it sucks, right? Like
Yeah. Middle school sucks, and I think that's like that could be another takeaway from this, right?
yeah,
Too, is that like Aaron let's say for speculation's sake that Aaron killed himself like late middle school because he finally was like, I hate everybody, they deserve it, and I'm sick and tired of this, and so he killed himself, and that's when the school went awry in 2012, right?
I don't. Yeah,
um
it doesn't really explain the
Imagine if
time.
he
It
had
doesn't
made it
really
farther.
explain the time gap. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
but maybe they just contained it until they went like had a team. I don't know.
And Nasar doing his research
Yeah, like
too, right?
they cleared out like the part of the containment is they cleared out the following blocks and they had the FBI patrolling it and
Yeah.
like so it's so weird like how like the initial um how like it was initially the school was condemned and then it was like they had a team come in like 10 years later. Um but like also that gives it time for one of the middle school teachers to kind of become a senior research personnel at the SCP Foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Evan, you got an SCP for us.
I do have an SCP for you guys. My SCP is just a couple blocks down. Is SCP 6310,
We
and
didn't
it has a
coordinate, by the way. We didn't coordinate that. Like, when we picked them, like, it was like 30 minutes between us finding them. So, like,
yeah.
it was not like we just went down a list. Like, we just found them that close to each other.
There's a lovely thing on SCP's website where you can go. For all of those that are listening to, you guys can do this too. There's a spot in the site where you can find random ones. It's just
Yeah, that's
random
exactly
links to an
what we
SCP.
do. It just,
And
like,
that's
just click
essentially what we
random.
did.
Um,
Just click, 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 click.
yeah.
Oh, this one's good.
Yeah, yeah, like, click, click, click. Killer potato. Click, click, click.
Like
So,
IKEA.
Yeah. IKEA, yeah.
That's good ones. But yes, anyways, this is the SCP-63210, and it has a bunch of different configurations, slash, I think they call them protrusions. In this one, for my synopsis of it, it is a interesting vine that is able to configure and disguise itself as a place. These said places are what the story calls wormholes, and the wormholes are able to as I said, disguise them as a place, and typically these places are almost exact copies of buildings that are just near the location. So, like, for example, one of the protrusions is a wanderer's library in an abandoned apartment building in Mexico City, and it's one of the different apartments in the apartment building. So there is one that you can actually go into that is completely safe, and then there's one that you go into that is a wormhole and most likely leads to you getting killed. Some of the buildings, the way in which they hurt and trap and kill people is very dependent on what that kind of place is. One of the protrusions that I would get into involves guitars, and when you strum the guitar that is in the SCP, it is extremely amplified, and it kills you through the actual sound that the guitar makes. As you go through these anomalies, the way that SCP has helped to try and contain and protect is typically personnel are outside of the SCP to make sure that people don't go into it. The vine itself grows really, really quickly and can find itself in the protrusion really nearby. It can kill and incapacitate victims. Once the victim is dead or incapacitated, this is quote, the dark green vines will emerge from the nearest surface and begin to consume them, rapidly absorbing most fluids and soft tissues, and then you never see of it. So it's able to it's still able to create the place in a way that it looks almost right. To go through the SCPs just in there, the protrusions that are inside of the SCP. A quick summary. The first one that they found is the Wanderer's Library I mentioned earlier. This is found in an apartment building in Mexico City. They contain it by having people outside. It appears pretty normal, but when you get inside, the way in which it affects people is it has cognitive triggers, and so it causes dementia. It causes schizophrenia, and it makes people go insane.
It's a Euclid class, so they're pretty good at containing this anomaly. It's not like absolutely all over the place. They're really good at containing it.
Yeah, they've only found 6 protrusions, and so typically when they find one, they're able to keep people outside and make sure that no one goes into it. But they put it as a disruption class of alarm, which means like you can kind of see it, but that's where, because it's an almost copy, that makes it really hard. And then the risk class as a warning, because if you go in, there is a significant chance you won't get out. The second protrusion is an underground pub in 3 Portlands. This one is the only one that was like decently far away. This one was not just a couple blocks down, but it's still imitating the pub in 3 Portlands.
3 Portlands is like a hardcore SCP kind of lore thing. So like, yeah, that's like the thing. Like this article like has so many like more deeper parts of the lore.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to find other SCPs that are with 3 Portlands.
Like, yeah, we'll do another 3 Portlands.
Definitely will. And this one, they're able to contain and copy the people that were inside of this pub. But like people behind the bar that are making drinks, they cannot move, they cannot leave the space. If you try and take them out of the space, the wormhole that is this entity and is this SCP will kill you. And then all the drinks that are served inside of this underground pub, they have fast-acting poisons and they intend to kill or paralyze victims before they can leave and whatnot. So it shows you too why, like, yeah, this SCP is a warning, because there are some of these protrusions that you actually go into, see, if you don't touch anything and you just walk out, you might be safe. The third protrusion is Site 66, which is a subterraneous greenhouse complex. The personnel that are employed here are inside, but also outside to prevent the back doors and elevators from opening and shutting. For this particular greenhouse, it decapitates people and and ends up digesting them in the plants because it locks the doors to the greenhouse. The fourth protrusion is the lobby of a United Nations administrative building. This building, as I was saying earlier, with the blocks down, this is literally a street down from the actual UN administrative building.
But also, it's like I think like with but it's like a global occult coalition, right? That place, like another like hardcore SCP kind of lore.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like it's like that controlled area.
It's managed by the GOC. This one will wait for victims to log in. And once they're inside, then they're neutralized. For the fifth protrusion, this one is similar to the third protrusions. That's another greenhouse. So it does similar stuff by locking them inside, and then the plants start feeding on the people. And then the last one, which my personal favorite, this is why I picked this SCP, John, is there's Chandler's Music Shop, which is a music shop I've had the ability to go to in Denver,
Oh, I
Colorado.
didn't know that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You actually went to this music shop not that long ago.
Yeah, I went to it because I was
It was like,
dude,
that was like 3 weeks ago. Like,
yeah, visiting Denver. It was so cool.
yeah.
It's a lovely little guitar shop for any of those who know like Guitar Center and whatnot. Like it's similar, but it's more of a location that's just in Denver. For this one, this is also a couple blocks down, and so the way that they harm the entities that walk inside, if you were to pick up one of the acoustic guitars and you were to play it, then the entire area amplifies the guitar sound to, and I quote, 250 decibels, and it starts popping eardrums and sending people into cardiac arrest, which is insane. That is like double the sound capability from like a fighter jet. I mean,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It is wildly loud. So, typical procedure in containing this is having personnel outside, which is why it's easy to make sure that people are not harmed by this SCP, because as long as the people know about a possible new protrusion, which this vine can just move around at a whim.
Yeah, it comes through like wormholes, right? So like
yes.
It's pretty
because it makes a wormhole, and so because it goes through it can kind of just pop in anywhere. It's quite the what's the word called? It's like a plant that goes into a new place and like destroys the environment.
Oh, yeah, like an invasive species.
Yeah, an invasive species.
Yeah.
Dead on. It's like an invasive species, except it opened up little wormholes and copies places and kills you.
Yeah, it's just
do you have any
the worst.
Yeah. So do you have anything to say on that, John?
Dude, I mean, so I really think that it's interesting. Like, I do enjoy like a good hardcore lore SCP. You know what I mean? Like an SCP that just got like, it's got multiple things to tie in. It can be hard to follow, but like, you know, there's so much like there's a lot of like hardcore SCP like stuff that goes out there, right? And this is one of them. I think it's really it is like kind of a change of pace from the other one. It's not like as much of like a containment procedure. There's not many like, you know, I mean, it's not like a log here.
Yeah, they don't have logs, and I was gonna say there too, like John, for the folks at home, he's been involved with SCP a lot longer than I have.
Yeah.
And so when you're reading some of these locations, you're like, oh wow, so they're tying in, you know, this from this really mainstream story.
Yeah.
On the SCP website, right? And for me, I'm just like, oh yeah, no, they kill this guy in the greenhouse, like, or the
like even like
Freeze Portland, and
even if you like keep up with a lot of SCP stuff, I find it hard to keep up with like all of like the like background lore of the SCP Foundation, like of the SCP wiki, just because that's how it is by design. But like 3 Portlands, so wait, the one in 3 Portlands. 3 Portlands is a pocket dimension that is linked to Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, and the Isle of Portland, and it's like controlled by like, you know, a different like cult group of the SCP, not the global cult. It's like the Serpent's Hand, and so like, you know, it has like the Serpent Hands and the Global Occult Coalition in this article, which are both like more like other SCP foundations that are at odds with the SCP Foundation. And so that's where it's interesting. Is like the challenge that like they face, right, in the containment, right, and when it comes down to it, this is just a vine, man. Like, you know what I mean? This is a vine, and it's different. Like, vines are a pain in the ass. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no
And
matter
so,
where they are, they seem like invasive species.
right? But like, no, this is like a vine, right? Like, it grows everywhere. My dad, he grows hops, right? I think Evan's seen this.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to contain hops because they're a vine. And so, like, at the end of the day, man, this is just like any other vine, right? Like, it is everywhere, this vine. And so I think that, like, this is like a cool interdimensional vine, right?
Yeah.
Where, like, it can go everywhere, right? It can go anywhere. But like, it hit the SCP Foundation is inhibiting the growth of it. And so I guess like the like longer it takes them to figure it out, right? What areas are compromised, the faster it's going to grow. So right,
Right.
if they didn't get
That's
a
what
hold of
makes
this,
it so tough.
if they couldn't get a hold of this, where could these vines go?
Yeah, and just think of how many more protrusions we would have.
Yeah,
Like that's what makes this. That's what makes it. What class is this again? I think
it's Euclid. It's
it's a
like the
Euclid.
second. It's like the second class would be the best
Yeah.
way of describing it. Right.
Yeah, they're able to lock it down, but I think that's just the overall ability of the SCP rather
Yeah,
than
and I think that
the,
like if they found another location, they're
velocity.
gonna be able to contain it pretty easily. It's also like a conscious vine. Like it understands what's going on, right? Like, it says like pretty specifically like, oh, you can't hang up signs because like the SCP is just gonna change the signs. You know what I mean? Like, so like they actually have to have physical people there that understand the locations. Like this vine is just elusive in its nature, and so you know that's where like you kind of have to like appreciate the vine in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because it also has some like other qualities to it, right? Where it's just not like this, poison ivy style vine where it's just killing everyone, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So what do you think of it?
I thought it was a great SCP. I thought they did a cool job of showing the different types of protrusions. But they also talk about how like it is pretty dangerous, but through the power and the strength and knowledge of the SCP, it's able to be contained.
Yeah.
But I can certainly see like I like an open NS SCP for that. Like if somebody wanted to add to it or go like I'm writing another protrusion because I thought of one that's really cool. Like you can just start adding on to it. I think that's what makes some of these SCPs really, really fun. Is that if you can give the chance for other people to write stuff about it and give
You can
more
just like
lore
add
and
like
give
whatever
more-
if like the author or if like they are
Right.
okay with it.
Yeah,
And like this
totally.
is cool because right, like I think maybe the SCP understands like the Foundation's already catching on this specific SCP, and so they're like, man, I'm just gonna go somewhere else. You know what I mean? That's what that SCP is thinking. Like, right?
Right.
The Vine, I guess they like it kind of is catching on, right? It's just like, oh, this is what's going on, so like I can figure it out, and I'll just go in these areas that the SCP Foundation doesn't have as much of a presence in.
Yeah, like these jerks, I'm leaving.
Yeah. So like, because again, at the end of the day, it's a plant. Like its whole job is to reproduce.
Yeah.
But yeah, I dig this kind of SCP. You know me, Evan. Like I am a sucker for a cool containment log. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, to really see like what they
So like,
do. I
it
think
just
it's
doesn't have that like hardcore containment log, but
I think what was cooler was to see like I don't know. I really liked this one, the creative way of showing like the different protrusions, and it's not just like, yep, the vine comes and eats you up. It's like, oh yeah, it's able to get the people in the pub right, and it's able to know that the pub can put like can put different stuff and poison into the drinks, and they serve it to the people. Like it's almost perfect. There's things about it that aren't quite
yeah.
right, and I think that's what I like.
And it
so
knows
much.
about it clearly knows about the Foundation, right? Like, cause it's in the bottom of like one of the sites, right? Isn't it in the bottom of like an SCP like site?
Um, trying to see. It was at the bottom of UN. That was one of the ones it was at the bottom of.
What was it?
That was Protrusion 4.
Site 66, like the greenhouse in Site 66, right? So it literally is in one of the one of the SCP location sites, right? And so like you know, it's like it goes into like multiple locations, right? Um,
The first greenhouse gas one, or the
yeah,
first
yeah, it's in
greenhouse
like
gas,
an
first
SCP
greenhouse
complex,
complex.
and so
Gotcha.
like it understands kind of like these organizations like
Yeah,
Free
sub-basement 4.
Portland, Global Occult Coalition, and it seems like the Global Occult Coalition is contained in it, right? But
Yeah.
maybe it's got the idea right. The Global Occult Coalition, SCP Foundation, for people who don't know, has kind of they like to use it for their own benefit. They like to use SCPs
Yeah.
for their personal gain, and so like maybe the Global Occult Coalition might use this for something dangerous if they figure out how it goes. And like it also like
True.
they can't really destroy it. Like they tried to destroy it in this article, and like it is not like it just
Yeah.
regenerates uncontrollably fast.
Yeah. It's quite the vine.
Yeah, literally quite the vine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that is interesting. It is interesting to see that like the vine truly has a mind of its own. Not only is it growing based on the, it's trying to grab its hosts, because it's a plant, it's trying to feed and provide to itself, but from that too, it actually understands like, oh, these people are after me and I'm going to try and get them, and that's where I was able to go in Site-66. Again, showing to you all, I'm still getting into this. I didn't realize Site-66 was something SCP related.
well, like yeah. I mean, Evan's also a member, and I'm not, so like Evan's not giving himself as much credit.
Nope.
And there's a lot. There's like a lot of like stuff. Right, Site 66 is not like there are like tons of SCP sites. So you know what I mean? Like I don't remember all of them, right? But like the Site 6, like if you see Site 66 or Site 17 or Site 83, I think Site 17 is like one of the big ones. But that's always a good determiner that like it's taking place in like an SCP site. And whatever weird flower that was in SCP in the greenhouse down there is now gone. So like like in Site 66. So
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, all in all, I agree. SCP-6310 is a good one. I liked 6305 as well. But I feel like this is a good portion, a good spot to move on to our next
yeah.
discussion.
So Evan,
Speaking of cults,
yeah.
and that is the other thing we wanted to talk about was John and I watched the movie Hereditary. For those who don't know what Hereditary is a movie that was made within the last decade, which is what the director wrote, which is what I read this morning, trying to find a few things about it. They did not want to call it a horror film. They wanted to call it a family drama which turned into a nightmare, and I think that's a beautiful way.
I mean, it's a horror movie, but like that is a good.
Yeah, quite.
It is a horror movie.
It is. It's still a horror movie. It's one of the best horror movies I've seen.
No matter what the director wants to say, it's a horror movie.
Right. Yes.
But what do you think of it? What are your thoughts?
I will fully say Hereditary is one of the horror films that I've seen personally myself that I really, really like. It is just a downward spiral of stuff. They have great little additions. I think the use of silence in their soundtrack is really good because they'll have moments of which they're looking at the sun and they're looking at Charlie as well, where like they do things and they're kind of going around that house, which used to be the mom's mom, so the grandma, and like it just stops, and like you see like what's going around. It allows the viewer to not only listen to the music, but when there's no music, it really allows them to open up their eyes and see what's going on. And then there's just like little details come out, like the flies that you hear from upstairs in the attic. And I think they did a great job with that. There's elements in the plot that make sense and things start coming together. And John, I know you only watched this once since I recommended it to you within the last couple of weeks. But for me, this is now like the third or fourth time I've watched it. And so now I was able to pick up within like the first part of the film where it's not so horror, right? And there's little tiny things that are like, they start to foreshadow what's going to happen. Like the seal that was worn on the grandma's neck.
Yeah,
was on
that was like one of the first things I noticed.
and like I was like, whoa, it's all over the place, which is insane. And then when it starts to all unfold and similar to SCP-6305, where people are starting to be taken control of, and there's this element of schizophrenia, and then it just all turns into this cult, and oh man,
It's got the spectral part to it. You know what I mean? It's got like the ghost and the spectral part, just like
yeah,
SCP-6305.
yeah, that is true. But I loved it. It just gets better and better and better, and more is revealed. And I think they do a good job of, like, really the protagonist in this film is the mother. And so you really see her, like, trying, and, she's getting herself help after her mom died, and then Charlie died. And so, like, it's not hitting her yet. And then eventually, like, it consumes her, and like the scene at which she's in like the top corner of the room looking at the sun, like, oh my gosh, dude, it's downright great. What did you think of it, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I don't think as highly of it. I really feel bad for the son. Like, you know what I mean? I really feel bad for the son.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like like what he did, he like killed his like sister. I mean, I don't know, like out of negligence, right? And so you really feel bad for him, and you know what I mean? I think that the film had a good opportunity, and I think the family way of describing it is perfect, right? And I think there's a way where that movie could end. I'm talking in like the last like 20 minutes, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Where it was a psychological film and the mother was the villain. That's what I like genuinely think. Like there is a like you could say that, right? And I like that so much more than like satanic cult stuff. Like I think you know this, right? I think I've said this many times to you, Evan, because like again, horror is like kind of like one of our things. I hate like Satanist cult crap in media. Like I think it's such a cop out, and so I mean I'm also
It can be.
yeah, it can be. I'm also like a pretty religious person, so that kind of stuff just like disgusts me just on like years and years of religious belief too. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah, because you see it and you're like,
I'm just like that doesn't really make. I was like that doesn't make sense at all. You know what I mean? So like, I think that.
But isn't that kind of the idea of a cult, though? Like the idea of a
I guess
cult, it's stuff that just does not make sense.
Yeah, I just think you know what I mean. I think the mom is such a villain in the movie, and I think the mom leads to her family being torn apart more so than anything else. And I do actually agree, like with I agree with what like the like director said or the writer, right? It's family drama, and it is
It really is. Obviously, they go into such a horrific, cult horror twist to it. But think about, like, yeah, the grandma's not in a cult, and we were to just look at a normal family. Something like death can be really hard, and so it shows how
like
drama ensues within the family and how it starts to slowly tear them apart. This didn't really get too horror-y yet. This was like kind of, we're getting midway through the film when Charlie died. And at one point, the mom, coping, which I think was a great scene, she drew what she thought the car accident was like, and she got it pretty close.
Like she like is an architect, so like she like made like the physical like small time architect. So she'll like her job in the movie was she would make like the like 3D models of like whatever, like a YMCA or a hotel like auditorium.
She showed how it houses parks.
Yeah, and she made a 3D scene of her daughter dying, and like her daughter slept in her treehouse when she shouldn't be, right? Which like all kids do stuff like that, like you know what I mean? They're stubborn about stuff, and she started sleeping in it after her death, and the mom was just like, the hereditary piece of it is there is like this mental illness that kind of like protrudes in the family. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I think you have that down to a T.
Right,
and you really saw how she was trying to cope with her emotions. Because, like, all that seemed normal.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it's normal, but it's like, it showed that with just in a normal family, minus the cult stuff, that's how sometimes people cope and grieve. And for her, she put it through her work, which I think is very common and what a lot of people do in their lives.
Yeah.
And then what I was gonna get to was how they all sat at the dinner table. No Charlie. It's the son, the dad, and the mom, and it's just dead silent. And
Yeah.
that to me was like a wow, that
And
hits.
then they start
That
blaming
can
each other.
hit.
And then they start blaming each other, which is a part of the grief process.
Yeah.
And I totally also could see a version of this movie where like they all forgive each other at that dinner table after they like get that cathartic yelling out. It's exactly 1 hour into the. By the way, 1 hour exactly is when that scene is. I watched it.
Is it really?
Yeah, because I was like, after they got all this yelling out, if they all forgave each other, movie's done right here. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I
No,
mean? Like,
and you're absolutely right.
like,
You're absolutely right.
and like, you know, the reality is when you go through something traumatic like this, and this may be like my job, you can't start blaming each other for that. Like, you know what I mean? That's just like you're gonna lose more people by blaming each other. Like emotionally, you're gonna lose your contact with more people than
Yeah.
than you gain. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
you know, that's.
Absolutely.
But like grieving's like hard, especially when you lose something close. Like I don't know about Evan, but like actually Evan was there. Like I lost someone earlier this year, really hard, and Evan was literally there with me. Like what? Like you were there with me a day after the funeral. You were with me the day
Yeah.
of the funeral, right? And
Yeah.
it was pretty hard. And so like you grieve in different ways, and like the mom just did not grieve well at all. And like of course, right? And like it shows kind of her mental unraveling. It's like how I kind of viewed the film. And like now, like at the end of the film, you're like, oh, it's all this like spiritual crap. But like I much prefer the mental kind of thriller of, you know what I mean? Like the mental thriller of it. And it just kind of threw that out the window. And like the cult wasn't really mentioned much in the movie. You know what I mean? So it kind of felt like it was a little out of left field in a way. Like this ending where
Was
like
a little out of left field. That's where like as I've seen it now for like the fourth time, I realized like, oh, this is where they throw in the cult stuff early in the movie. But like you said, right, it's not explained. They don't explain the mom was involved with something weird. You kind of got it when she went to the grieving meeting that second or third time, and that woman like stopped her in the car. She was like, "I knew your mom." So she kind of, or from the point of the person watching the film, they could maybe put together like, oh, a bunch of people that she had never seen before showed up to the funeral. This person out of left field just goes, "I knew your mom.
oh yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
let's
yeah, I get what
talk
you're saying
about
now.
it." So there's a couple things where it's like, why does everybody know the mom?
I don't
I think that was a
know.
question when the first time I watched it, I was curious about. But I agree, it really goes 0 to 100 when just like we see the satanic thing up in the the grandma was taken out of the burial and putting up in the attic, and then
Yeah,
there's
and
like
now you
all the
realize that's the
candles.
cult that did that just to fuck with the family. You know what I mean? Or like do whatever
Yeah,
with the family.
and to like complete the process of which we're getting the spiritual entity, and it needs to find a new host.
Yeah.
So like all of that was very, I agree, that was all very 0 to 100. It was all like, whoa, okay, this is where this movie's going now. It's not just a family drama. It's not just the mom is having a really hard time grieving, and so now like the dad, which by the way, he's the person I feel the worst for, because he's just like, come on, man,
He's like really trying to like I mean he could have been better, but he's really trying to hold this
Absolutely.
family together. And I think
Yeah.
he's wise enough to be like, yo, you're about to lose your son too. Like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I also do see a version of this film where after that end credit scene and they're worshiping this dude, the Peter, the brother, I see like him go along with it for like, you know, like however long until he can get away, and then he gets away and he calls the police. Like he's like, there's no fucking way I'm getting out away from these cult members unless I like just play along with whatever they're. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Hmm.
not that's not how the movie was written, right? It's obviously like a spiritual transition. Um,
Yeah, and they're trying to show that like no matter, well, maybe this is kind of what I'm thinking now, right? But it's like no matter how much you grieve or whatnot, like the cult is going to bring things together. And maybe that's where they're kind of going in the film. But to use the original director's words, though, I think it's truly they're trying to show like how bad can a family get out of hand, and that's like a cult takes over.
yeah. Um,
Oh, but the dad just
That's
going up in
exactly
flames.
right.
Ugh, feel so bad for that guy.
I felt really bad for Peter because he was like, this is like, it's when you make a situation bad, like someone like the worst thing happens for him, right? Like his sister, who's 13, comes to him with a party and he smokes weed, and she has an allergic reaction. I don't think to the weed, but to something else, right?
It was the cake.
It was the cake.
She ate the cake and she's allergic to nuts.
Yeah, which is a weird thing to put in a cake, but and
Or
like
maybe it was a
he
small
is
thing.
like he gets her in the car and he just rushes to the hospital like a good brother. You know what I mean? And she rolls
No,
down.
he was trying to do the right thing after he
And
made
then
a
she rolls down the
mistake.
window because, you know, she can't breathe because she's, like, having an allergic reaction. And she sticks her
Yeah.
head out the window, and
And there was like something in the road.
there was, like, a dead deer in the road. And, like, he, like, swerves to miss it, right? Because, like, he's panicking because it's nighttime, and he swerves, and, like, she dies because her head's sticking out the window. That's essentially, I'm going to spare the details. And, like, it just, like, then, like, his mom, like, essentially is shitting on him the whole time, and, like, he's feeling the guilt of everything behind him when he's trying to save, like, you know, he's trying to save his sister. And so that's what's really unfortunate, right?
It is unfortunate, and you can see him just like, oh, that scene. That might be like the one of the most powerful ones in that film. Is when the car is stopped, and we don't even see what Charlie looks like.
Yeah, he just
It
is
just
like,
it looks
he's
at
frozen.
him.
He's frozen.
No music, and he's just like, like
He just is like
he can't even hold
completely
himself together.
frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like really sad.
And what else do you do? Like if you're in
yeah,
that shock,
it's so
he just drove
fucked up.
away.
We didn't drive. Well, I mean, there's more that happened to it. You know what I mean? Like they just like completely skip over what happened. You know what I mean? But like you're in shock at that point. You know what I mean?
Well,
And-
he was so in shock, and he was so ashamed of what he had done that what they ended up showing was he went upstairs. He got home, went directly upstairs, and he went to bed. And then they show him waking up, and that's when the mom's like, "I'm going to work, honey." Smooch goes away, and then you just hear like garage door shutting, click clack of the heels, and then you just hear
Yeah, the scream.
there's a scream, and then
Yeah.
the
Then they
the
go through the whole
absolute-
process. And so like
the-
I mean he was
yeah,
just
the
in
morning.
like he wasn't trying to get away with it. He was like literally in shock.
Yeah, he couldn't believe it either. He was probably still in the same amount of shock and mourning that the mom was when the dad was trying
Yeah.
to comfort her in the bedroom.
And
yeah.
the sister, by the way, was also not sane. And the movie does not do a good job of making her 13. They make her more like 11 at best. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
make
I
her. You know what I mean? So like that's I think kind of weird.
Yeah, because like 13 to me was still like,
Yeah, I know. Like what the fuck?
high
Like,
school.
it's just so
Like
weird.
yeah, she would go to a high school party. Peter seemed far older than Charlie. Charlie seemed like
Yeah, it just was like weird, like how old they made her seem. And like clearly she had some mental illness too, like as a kid, like they made her seem that way, right? And so like the hereditary is the mental illness, the grandma, the mom, and the daughter, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I literally watched the movie this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're right about the soundtrack, right? I think a lot of horror movies are really good about that, but like the soundtrack and like audio design, it's like what really makes or breaks a movie or a game or a TV show. You know what I mean? It's why like Chernobyl's like one of my favorite shows out there is because it has like the
Yes.
best audio design of all time. And so
Yeah,
like
it's fantastic.
Hereditary does have a great audio design in that like, you know,
And that's with silence.
it's yeah,
There's
it's
so many
about- or,
horror
like,
films that you and I have watched. The music is trying to make you like, there's a
or like
background to it.
ambient sounds to everything. You know what I mean? They're ambient sounds that are good, right? And
Yes.
that's what
For them, they were able to show the grieving. They were able to show the mourning and the nightmare and Peter and the car and the mom. And then like when it got culty and creepy, it allowed the person viewing to be able to see what's going on. There's no music, so my only my only sense that I can go off right now are my eyes. And so that's when like you see the mom in the corner, and then like she's moving across the walls, and the dad's going on.
yeah, that was
fire.
kind of a horror
You're
trope to
losing
me.
it.
That was kind of like a horror movie trope to me. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, but I think for me it became all too real when like there's nothing else. It's complete silence. You're just looking at something that's like menacing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the background thing. It was so interesting. Like, I mean, I think it was an interesting movie. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um,
Why can I get again? Like, why didn't? What about the ending, which was like the last 20 minutes when it really started delving into the, oh, this is a cult. Like,
dude,
what about that made you go, man, I don't like this.
it
This
just
isn't.
like I don't know, like it just like was random, kind of out of nowhere. You know what I mean? And I think that there was like a mental ill. I mean, obviously there were hints and stuff to it. You know what I mean? Now that like I think about
Mhm.
it, because like they have like the cult symbol, which I do appreciate. The cult symbol is not the 5-pointed star because that is like that would be over the top, like too much. You know what I mean? It's like I've never seen the symbol before, but like it's like spread throughout the film, and clearly they like all the people at the funeral. You're absolutely right, and like the mom, the like the mom in the film talking about her grandma, her mother, right? The grandma talking about her privacy. That's clearly a cult kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just think, right? I just think personally, like they were doing such a good job of talking about the mother's like mental health and it unraveling, right? They were doing such a good job,
Hmm.
and like it
Yeah.
just
You
completely.
wished it would have went into something like
Yeah, I wish it would have been
a
totally different. I wish it would have
good
been more
resolution.
mental health related, and they just like completely squandered that. Like the honestly, I remember the moment is when the dad burned alive. Like it completely squandered it at that moment because that's when it became almost like completely, you know what I mean, like magical in a way. And like there might be a couple of other minor details, but like that's why. And like I just think that like and I personally think that this idea of like movies using like obviously like me and you, we live in a predominantly Christian like like culture, right? And so like putting together a bunch of like loosely formed ideas of like Christianity and like going anti of them, I just think is just a huge cop out. And
Yeah, it seems unauthentic.
yeah, it doesn't really
I
think
agree.
yeah, it doesn't really seem authentic. And then doing that and just putting it in the last 20 minutes of the film, like for these cult members, you know what I mean? That's
Hmm.
what's like
I didn't see anything that was too like, at least to me, right?
the
This is how
ending.
I
I'm
saw
just
it.
talking about the ending. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
sure. I'm right there too. I'm just about the ending part. There didn't seem anything to me that seemed overly like they were trying to do like cop out Christian stuff. To me, it seemed like they were trying to do more like the stereotype of like a cult. So all
but
the
like here's
naked
the thing.
bodies
And so
and
like
stuff.
one of the things that we may be doing on another episode is Archive 81. But like Archive 81 does a good job of like doing someone that's like not Satan or like not like hell or not the devil. You know what I mean? It's different if you right. There is a difference, right, between being anti-Christ and being a cult for something else in like these like storylines. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And this like storyline was not a cult for something else. It was literally a cult rejecting the Trinity, right? The God, the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the
Yes.
Son,
Yeah.
Christ. They literally say that. That's like the last line. Like now you're the eighth like queen of hell or something like that. You
Oh, so
reject.
I guess it really is more
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. And so like
satanic Satanism.
I think
Yeah.
that like personally, yeah, that's what
Hmm.
I just personally think that's like
That's in it.
such,
Yeah. I forgot that
that's like
detail.
such a weird like cop out. Like I'm sure like at Archive 81 again, like that's like we're gonna cover that hopefully in another episode. Like it is, they like pick like some random like um, you know, demonic like spirit from a different culture, right? And they use that rather than just being purely anti-Christian. And there are a lot of other problems that you can probably talk about with that, with like, relativism, Christian relativism or like cultural relativism. But like for the most part, I just think that it'd be much better if they came up with like a demonic spirit, right? And instead of just being anti-Christian. And that's really the problem that I had with it. Is it just like to me, it seems lazy and seems like a cop out to like
Yeah.
have like
It
a cult
wasn't
or like these.
original
That's
enough.
like how I feel about like the satanic stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm so like done with like that satanic like kind of stuff. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fair. And I think from like that, that's definitely more knowing you, right? Like that's more for you. That
Yeah.
seems like up your alley of like why is to you wouldn't like it, which I get and I totally agree. But I think the part that I kind of looked more towards, if I'm really going to critique this, is the fact that like there were a lot of culty stereotypes that were thrown in there, where
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they just want to let's make it weird. Like the naked bodies to me seems like
Yeah, I thought that
weird,
was a hallucination, and then it came to like that was just
but then
those
it
were
was
cult members.
yeah, yeah. Then it was like this is their like the gown that they wear is nothing, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that seems a bit extreme. It's adding to the creepy effect, right? You know, it's just a bunch of random people
Yeah, they're just butt naked. Yeah,
butt naked.
and the lighting wasn't great, right? And so like I was like, is that like the dead family? Like you know what I mean? I was like, is that what they are? Like you know what I mean? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's a dark like horror. And I have a great monitor and great lighting, and I watched this in the dark, and I had trouble seeing. If I'm gonna be honest, like all old like naked white people kind of look the same to me. Um, and like that's exactly what the first like group of naked. I thought like they like never had more than like three, so I was just like, are they just like dead? Like, are these like just the dead like family? Is this like the dad, the mom, and like the grandma? And so like that's you know what I mean? That's kind of how I felt. That's how I felt at the end of the movie. I just felt like, you know, it was so. I just thought
Yeah.
it was cheap at the end, like how they did it. But I thought it was great until like the last 20 minutes because I thought it was psychological.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Okay. Yeah, I it's still one of my favorites when it comes to just like the horror aspect. It definitely
Oh no, it
um
gives you that anxiety. It's pretty good about that.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of horror movies, both like older and like 80s, 90s, and modern today, that like they can be predictable, and I felt like with this one it wasn't necessarily predictable anytime, which I really like because I think a lot of horror movies it's like oh well the obvious option is this is going to happen or like oh here it goes you know this person's gonna die and like I never really got that aspect during the film.
Yeah, that is true. Right. I kind of I
I didn't
agree. I
expect
can tell.
Charlie's head to be decapitated. I didn't expect the
Yeah,
mom to
I mean,
just start grieving in ways of through her work in the you know by drawing the scenes of you know the dead
yeah.
and it relieved a good sense of foreshadowing, but it wasn't necessarily like a oh this is what's gonna happen. You know, to me, I that's
Yeah,
where
you
I
know, every time you see like a fucked up kid like in a family and you know it's gonna be a horror movie, usually your assumption is that kid's gonna kill the family, and it didn't do that at
yeah
all, right?
no no Charlie died first.
Yeah,
Well,
Charlie
the
did die
grandma
first.
died, but Charlie
Actually,
died
grandma, yeah.
first. Yeah.
So yeah, that's our thoughts on. So, you ready to move? You want to move on to Hellblade?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to Hellblade.
Yeah. So you know we play games on stream. First game we played on stream was Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. Um, and it has got to be one of the best games I've ever played. Um, so Evan, why don't you start us off on this, or do you? Oh no, you want me to start off? Yeah. So Hellblade, right, is about they had to kind of emphasize like how much detail they put into this game. They had like 4 PhDs they put in the credits that were like psychologists and historians, right? And so the setting is it takes place in like ancient Celtic Ireland, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and it takes place with Senua is our main character, and you kind of like find out that like her husband um it died in like a Viking raid, right? And
Yeah,
so
something. Yeah.
yeah, like she and like her idea is that like she's going to go to hell and bring her husband back, right? And like um her husband is like amazing, dude. He is such a supportive guy, and he is so sexy. Like I would go
He's
to hell.
hunk. Yeah, no,
I
I
would
love
go
him.
to hell. I would go to hell for him too. And you soon pretty quickly like realize, right? This is what's happening. Is there's a mental illness, and specifically it's psychosis, right? So like
Yeah.
voices in the head, and like it's a familial thing. And it is actually the first thing you notice because literally everything that's happened is like said in like multiple different voices. It's voiceover. It's like it took us like I think 7 or 9 hours, between 7 and 9 hours to play to beat it.
Yeah.
And there was a literal constant like everything that happened in the game was amplified by the voices in her head. Like someone that was real psychosis, right? They consulted with an expert on psychosis for this, right? So like um you know, they Like if you were doing really good at a task, the voices would amplify that. You got this. You're gonna bring Damien back. Or if you like could not figure out a puzzle, because there were a lot of puzzles, it would be like, you're gonna die here. Like it was, and me and Evan, it was our first game we played, and like we could not talk during it. Like it was so hard. Like it was like the first game we streamed, and it was kind of a bad game to stream, not because it's a bad plot or a bad gameplay, which those are both fantastic, but it is always something happening in like her head. There's always some kind of conversation going on.
At one point we were when we first started out the game, I was kind of being and jumpy and jokey on the narration as we were playing the game, right? Because I'm trying to talk during it, and John and I quickly through some of the scenes in the very beginning just to really understand what was going on. We shut up because the voices were so telling as to what her emotions were, because being, I guess you could say, you could call her a Celtic warrior, like her face would show you like no fear, no emotion. She's pretty
badass. Yeah,
she was very determined, to bring back her husband. But the voices told you exactly what was going through her head of like, you should go back. Why are you leaving the clan? Why are you leaving the tribe? One voice would say, you're doing the right thing. You need to save him. And then another voice would be like, no. It was like if Rick James and a narrator from like NBC were talking to you, like, the NBC,
but it was like her voice that was saying
what's going on in her head. Yeah, right. But her voices had each different personalities, and that was what was shown really in the psychosis. You can do it. No. And it got really extreme at points. I mean, there was a part at which we went to the tree, and the tree had like little trials and tribulations to go through.
There were some of those trials were
past. And oh my god, we might have been silent for like 15 minutes, John.
Yeah, which is weird when you do a two-person stream. That's weird if you do a one-person stream not to talk. Like two people, like they're like some of those trials were so messed up. Like it was they were hard and they were like dramatic. You know what I mean? And it was like, and through the plot you kind of realize that her dad, he's like, her dad is really like kind of the one that like turned the village, or like hinted at the village to the Viking warriors that came and then attacked their tribe, right? That's really what you find out happened. And her mom also suffered from psychosis. And like
sight
yeah, they call it the sight,
is what
right?
they called it. Do you want to give a breakdown of like the family, including the husband?
I mean, I pretty much just did, right? You know what I mean? And like the mom, like just she had the sight, and her husband, I don't remember, it's something with a D, but it's like something like Damien, right? And we're just gonna call him that for like,
I think it's Damien. It might be Damien.
It's not. There's no way it's Damien.
I don't remember.
Go ahead, Google it while I'm talking. But like he kind of supports Senua, like he encourages Senua like in the most positive way possible. So it's so like he's so supportive and everything. And when her dad kind of blames her for everything and then sells their village out, or their tribe out, to the Viking warriors, is when he dies. And the mother had died previously. And so, a lot of the storyline is her combating, like, a lot of the storylines, like, honestly, like, you can say that almost all of it's made up, right? Like, her idea is to go to hell, and at the end, she realizes that's not possible. And, like, it literally has you in a fight sequence in the end that you cannot win. There's not a game possibility for you to win the fight sequence.
Yeah.
You have to lose it.
Yeah.
And that was also an amazing scene. The visuals on the game were amazing. Like, it had amazing graphics.
Yeah. The graphics were really, really good.
And like,
to look up the husband real quick, it was Dylan.
Dylan, yeah.
Dillian. Yes.
Yeah, so it's Dylan.
Senua, Dylan. The husband is named the dad. The dad is named Druth. I think Senua had a brother named Zimbel.
Oh,
and then the
that's
mom was
definitely
Alina.
That brother is game 2. So Dylan, at the end, she had been carrying Dillian's head around, and she lets the head go. Like, she lets the head go, and kind of lets him go, is the idea that is what's happening.
Yeah, that like she can't save him anymore. Because that was the whole quest, right? It was she was going out with this head because she was told by potentially her own head voice that like if I can save Dylan, I just need to go to this part of the world and use the head as a sacrifice and he will be brought back to life and I can be with my husband again. And it shows you that you, the controller of Senua, you have to tell her that.
You cut out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
But
No.
you're back. Yeah, and so it's kind of like it has that kind of ending. It also does a lot of PTSD, right? One of those experts, I think, was an expert in PTSD. And like, I think me and Evan died during like the PTSD like chapter, like the exploration of the game.
Yeah.
And when that happened, me and Evan's first reaction, like how like the sequence or the PTSD flashback when you died, was that is not okay. That was such a fucked up flashback. Like, so like.
Oh, are you talking about the fire?
Yeah, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You died in the darkness, and then like oh my gosh, that was so messed up. Like talk about motivation not to die is like, yeah, that was so like rough. It was such a good game. It was not for the faint of heart. Like, I think if I had like someone in my family or I had some problem talking about mental illness, there's no way I could play this game.
No, because all those voices and whatnot would just start to
holy shit! Like if you had
mind.
some kind of like chronic anxiety or like serious anxiety, this game would not be it. But like it's an amazing storyline and it takes you through a journey. It's got good graphics. The puzzles in it are really interesting too because the puzzles are all pattern recognition, which is also like it can be a symptom of psychosis. So like even the puzzles have that level of detail to them.
Yes.
And it's really not that
plot. Anything about the plot in the game, you and I both agree, was dead on.
Yeah.
It was so good.
And all the combat was good.
Game mechanics, it always relayed to the plot. But that's what I wanted to say next was I still think the puzzles, they were challenging in their own right. They weren't too repetitive. And I felt like it was like, okay, this is a game. This is a game. I know why the puzzles are happening. I get how this is in her head. But at the same time, I genuinely enjoyed the puzzle in the game. And then the fighting was very, very plot-based. The fighting always came out in times in which she was having her own mental battle, and so you end up seeing a physical entity, right? In fact, the very first fight of the game that you lost was on purpose.
Yeah, it was super weird.
It was very strange. The fighting could get a little repetitive, but like you unlocked little abilities, and I think the abilities to emphasize again, everything is plot based in this game. It's to show that she's getting more confidence, she's getting better.
Yeah, and I mean, like the first death is really that is the most controversial death in like it's that's the biggest criticism because after you die for the first time, it has a what's the best way to say this? It like has like a little description that pops up, and it says that like if you die too many times, essentially the game's over.
Yeah.
And that is where the criticism comes from for the game because it is a straight up lie. That never happens if you die too many times. You can die as many times as you want, and it is just to like it's just for like a more anxiety, which I understand the criticism. You know me, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of permadeath in like any game other than a survival game. And so I
especially when the game was like we encountered all this plot and it takes a while to get through some of it. And so the thought of a permadeath at the beginning before we looked up and went, all this shit's fake. We were like, oh my god, this would be terrible. Like if we went halfway through this game and then permadeath.
we have, and we're going to talk about this game later. We played this game called Inscription on screen, where like it makes you replay the game multiple times to beat it, and like that was a little painful at times because
it was. But the game,
I understand that, but like
we'll talk about this more. But
but like
the game at least had the. If you were played Inscription, you had a different gameplay every
every time.
time.
Yeah, but
But if you did Senua, it would be the same exact
yeah,
thing.
like I couldn't. I mean, I like really like the game, and maybe I'll play it again one of these days. I have an RTX card now. When we played this like 4 months ago, it was not. I did not have an RTX card, even though
Not as beautiful.
RTX was automatically on, and so like we were getting in the first minute of gameplay or the first 30 seconds, which took us 5 minutes to get through, because
Yeah.
RTX was automatically on, and my 1060, my graphics card, was freaking out because it couldn't do it. And like we were getting like one frame every 5 seconds, and we're like, dude, is this like meant to be like this? And then like we check out the graphics settings, and we're like, oh my gosh,
Yep.
RTX is on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, again, it was like, it was also an interesting game because like the idea to start this channel came, and like that was the first thing we did, and like I don't know, man, it's gonna be difficult for other games to follow.
I know. Talk about starting off strong.
Yeah, it was really starting off strong, and so like, yeah, I mean, it's really one of the best. It was one of the best. It's probably the best like psychological thriller game that I've ever played.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh
but
yeah,
yeah,
totally agree.
yeah. Do you have anything else to add, Evan?
I think the big thing I would tell people here, and I think it's something we should start doing on our channel too, everybody listening, is that we'll definitely tell you like when we find these things, right? Like if we really like it and we think you should do it and play it or watch it or whatever it may be that pertains to the media that we talk about, this is a game I think anybody and everybody should play.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like,
unless it would pertain to you in a way that would cause your own
yeah,
self problems because it's pretty serious, and the people that they credit in the game with the 4 or potentially 5 PhDs, they hit psychosis on the nose, and that
yeah,
would be very tough.
yeah.
But if you're able to withstand it and really see like a true effect from the perspective of Senua in this game, I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean one of those, and so like this is like Celtic culture or like Irish. It's like not exactly Celtic. It's like a different group of people that used to exist in Ireland that like during the history of Europe might have gotten wiped out or assimilated. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but like
Yeah.
they have a historical expert that does all of this, right? So like there's more
Yeah.
to it. It's not just like that's one of the experts they got. And like I think the guy who's in Psychosis, he was Oxford, like Oxford, England, um, like Oxford, London, and
Mhm.
uh, Oxford's not in London, but anyways, it was Oxford, and like that's where they got him from, and he was really apparently he was really like he didn't want to do it at first, and then they told him like they got him on it, and they showed him how to do it, and he says this is exactly how I would present Psychosis, and um, I present Psychosis in um, my lectures.
Yeah.
And
But
so
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, a second one is coming out.
It is. Yes, I'm stoked for it.
And so that kind of goes into our like I guess our final or our conclusion of this is
Hmm.
um let's I think that like let's talk a little bit about like upcoming stuff that we're really looking forward to. Um Obviously, um the second one of this is going to be awesome.
Oh, I
Um
can't wait.
it's
I
going to be hype.
cannot wait.
Yeah, it's going to be so good. I don't know. I think the release date might have gotten pushed back. I thought it was supposed to come out in October, but like I haven't really um I haven't really heard much more. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, have you heard much more?
I was trying to look up something now and see when it's potentially coming out, and I think it was pushed back, so there's no official date. They
Yeah.
just told it was going to be out this late fall / early winter of 2023.
Yeah.
But
So like
I'm thrilled for it.
and like that's not exactly going to be Unfound, but I can pretty much guarantee you we're going to be streaming this like Hellblade
Oh,
2.
guaranteed.
Yeah. And then another couple. We're hyped for a couple of other things. Evan, what is the game that me and you are really hyped about though?
I'd say the game we're really hyped about. It's that it's the one you were showing me that's got like the slime.
Oh yeah, Scorn.
That's a yeah, Scorn. Yeah, Scorn. I think would be really good.
Yeah, it's like really based off of like the Alien, like the movie, and like the like lore behind that. It's really kind of based off of that artistic style. And gosh, and apparently there's not like any written word for the entire game. It's like
No.
mostly exploration, and there's not a lot of
Yeah.
shooting either. So it's gonna be a creepy game, but that's kind of what I'm probably looking forward to the most. And that's coming up in October, and that's something that like that's like a like we'll be streaming that release weekend probably if I had to guess.
Yep.
Um, that one is those are the two games coming out this winter that look really good. Obviously, like there's gonna be some other horror stuff that's gonna come out that no one's gonna know about.
Yeah.
We're gonna find that and we're gonna stream it. Um,
Hmm. I think another thing you could see us talking about in this podcast too. I think talking about movies kind of like Hereditary,
yeah,
which not a lot of people know about. I think doing another one like that too, I think would be a lot of fun because everybody knows of like The Conjuring and that entire series. But I think doing something else that's not too mainstream, and is like by different developers. And like the reason I think Hellblade's so good is because it's British made, and so you start to see like different cultures make their games as well
yeah.
and see how they come up with it, which I think could be something we could find really common on this channel. So we hope you guys are looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean it was pretty popular when it came out, but like also still like not like on the mainstream like of like the super mainstream of games. I mean like the I don't know the second game had like an E3 trailer, so like clearly clearly there is a like popularity to it.
Yeah.
And I think that we're probably gonna talk about Backrooms at some point. Like I'm really hyped for Backrooms.
Oh, dude, yes, I want to as well.
Dude, it's been like
That dude's going places.
that. Yeah, yeah. What is it? Like, what is his name? He
Oh
hasn't
yeah.
released a Backrooms video in like a month and a half.
I can't wait.
Like,
He's got like a 30-minute short film or
it is gonna
something
be.
that he
It's
made.
gotta be insane. Like, Kane Pixels. It's been a month. It's been specifically a month um, since he came out with anything.
Yeah.
And
He's been posting a lot of like YouTube pictures of what seems like
yeah,
scenes that he's in, that he's making or creating, and like that dude, oh my gosh. Like if he comes out with like a 45-minute short film, I'll be giddier than a kid in a candy store. Like I can't wait.
yeah, dude. He submitted like 7 photos over the past like month.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
he's working on something.
he's working on something big.
Yeah.
Um, and you know what like really kind of makes you feel like a failure sometimes? This dude is like 16. Like
He's in high school.
he's in high school. Like he
And
did.
he's making professional films. Like, yeah, they're only 8 minutes in a YouTube video, but the idea and like the absolute creativity behind the lore that he's making for the Backrooms
Yeah.
and async and the and what's going on and the history, he's got some of that tied in too. Like, outstanding.
Yeah, and like there are other like there's this other channel that popped up called Async Research. I have not gone through it and watched it yet, mainly because like I don't know, it's hard to compete with Kane Pixels, but like I'm gonna go like when I'm going to go through it and watch like Async Pixels at some point. Um,
Yeah.
so like that is like I mean, and obviously like he has really taken off Kane Pixels with like the creativity from the existing backrooms and
Yeah,
he
which
is
has been a lore for probably a couple years now.
yeah, but it wasn't really popular until he did it.
No, it wasn't.
I don't
There
think
was a couple
I
little
didn't find out about
things.
it. I don't think
Yeah.
I found out about it until like he came out with it. Right, and I'm in all that internet horror stuff like in the SCP. Right, like it took me like I mean I'm also not browsing 4chan, which is where it started from. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so like he like has done, and I actually like watched a couple of his videos before he got like big, like before like he came out the backroom stuff. Not to say he was big before, like right, like a couple 100,000 subscribers, because like he did an Attack on Titans thing. I remember this. So like he did, like years ago. You can go back in his subscriptions. He did. Oh, this is this year. 8 months ago, but before the backroom stuff really took off, he has done some like Attack on Titans like made in black and white filming because that's when Attack on Titans kind of like you know uh, that's when it kind of like started. Like that's when it kind of takes place. Is Attack on Titans is you know, early 20th century, and so like there's like black and white filming that he does
Yeah.
of like the Attack on Titans events happening. And so I was watching a couple of that, and that's kind of how I ran into the Backrooms, is because that new season of Attack on Titans had came out, and obviously I like watched like that, and then I like was looking at YouTube theories, and then that popped up, and so kind of led me down that rabbit hole. But yeah, Evan, you hyped for anything else?
Um, well, just have to keep digging. Obviously, they're friends of mine that know about us, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, we think you should do this and this and this." But obviously, John and I are trying to find things that we think,
Yeah.
we think are hidden.
Yeah, my
And
Steam wish list is like 30 games long right now. Have you seen? Are you looking forward to Nope? Have you seen that?
um, yeah, I have not seen it yet, but I do wanna
Yeah, it's
see
like
it.
on my list.
I think I think Peele makes some really good movies. I
Yeah, he
saw
really
Get
does.
Out and what was it, One of Us, and like I thought they were great. They were great. We might do one. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Um. Yeah. You got anything else, Evan?
No, that's all for me right now, man.
Yeah.
Tune
Well,
in on our streams. We stream a few times during the week for a couple hours, and we'll do our episodes of games.
yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. I hope you guys enjoyed finding what we found. I hope you guys can go find some more stuff. And if you guys find some stuff, like, let us know. We'll be
Yeah.
all about it. So yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm Evan,
I'm John.
and we are finding the unfound.